welcome to another episode of
80-Bit Podsmash,
Where Gaming Goes to Grab a Beer. We are your hosts.
I'm Penguin, he's Termite. Woohoo!
Hello.
That's the sound of our voices. This is what our voices sound like.
We are a weekly gaming podcast centered around smashing the ideas of culture, politics, art, science, and other things that we care about or that you care about together with video games.
Yeah, and tonight we are drinking, oh boy, Feldschlossen. It is a German beer, fairly cheap beer that we got from a store in our area called Aldi. So many of you may know what Aldi is, many of you may not. It's not a huge chain, but it is a chain of grocery stores. And they kind of sell like discounted groceries, but still like they have like a big, it's weird because they're actually kind of becoming like a Whole Foods competitor because they sell a lot of like organic stuff.
Yeah.
But it's all very, very affordable. Like it's the place that me and my wife go to get most of our groceries.
It's very no frills. Like they have very limited amount of products. They're not a supermarket, and you have to like box your own groceries or buy their bags.
Yeah.
So their stock rotates regularly. You're not going to have like that one thing you constantly need, or like sometimes it can go away and then come back later. And it's like the stores are nice and clean, but they're not super organized. They're not like, there's not a whole lot of people to help you find things. It's just like you can tell where they've cut costs.
Yeah, definitely. And yet they have some really good quality products too.
They do.
Like they have a lot of good organic stuff. So
And they are a German chain.
they're a German chain, so they have all this German beer there, and
it's easy to call it
really
off-brand.
affordable
Because you can't find it anywhere else. So you're like, it's only at Aldi.
Yeah.
And they do have their like mockery of Bud Light, whatever they call it, at Lidl. And Lidl is like their competitor.
It's a competitor, yeah.
So that kind of like weird exclusive branding for Aldi.
Yeah.
This is an Aldi beer.
Yes, this is an Aldi beer. It tastes like an Aldi beer. It's a black lager though, and it has surprising complexity though.
It does.
It tastes like a beer, but yeah. But
it's a light-bodied stout. Like a super like watery stout.
Yeah,
kind of what it reminds me of.
I kind of took a sip of it and I said, you actually heard the process in my mind because I was like, this is not good. Oh, it has surprising complexity.
Yeah.
Like it's got some flavors in there. I don't know what they are, and they're not like strong or powerful
malty,
flavors, but yeah.
Not really any smoke.
No.
So I wouldn't call it like smoky at all.
It's like a kind of a watered down Guinness is what I get out of it. Yeah. Okay. All right. Yeah. So today's episode, as you saw in the title, more than likely, we are going to be talking about theologies that appear in video games. Some philosophies in there too, but it's mostly going to be centered around some kinds of deities or worship that weirdly pops up in video games. Maybe not weirdly, maybe it's to be expected, because when you're talking about a storytelling medium, then religion's going to come into play. So we're not going to be talking about specific ones. We're not going to be sitting there talking about Islam or Buddhism or these like... We're not actually going to categorize them into actual religions. We're more going to be talking about like the underlying philosophies that come up in them. So we'll get more into the details later. But just theology and video games is kind of what today's topic is. So it's definitely going to get more into what we talk about when we describe our podcast, when we say that we smash culture and philosophy and religion and video. Yeah, this is going to be an episode that's more like that. So we're kind of living up to our own description in today's episode.
I've been wanting to have a conversation about this for a while.
Yeah, it should be fun. It should be we're going to try to make it more fun and interesting, more of like we're not going to try to be really, we're going to try not to be offensive, but we're also going to try not to be controversial or anything like that. We just want to talk about like interesting things that we're like, oh, that's a weird message for a video game, or maybe not a weird message for a video game. Maybe it's an incredibly profound one. So that's kind of what we're going to be exploring today. So buckle up, buckaroos, before we get into all of that.
There's a gnat. Sorry.
Yes.
I'm like cross-eyed and smacking the
If
air.
I had not just barely seen the gnat, I would have thought you're crazy, but that's fine. So anyways, before we get into all that, let's sort of just catch up our listeners as to how our weeks are going. How are you doing today, Termite?
I am actually sick.
What? You don't look sick and you don't sound sick, so you're like stealth-infecting me right now.
And I have very, very, very minor sinus infection.
And now I am upset because you're stealth-infecting me right now.
I think the science goes that you are contagious 2 weeks before symptoms. So 2 weeks ago when we recorded, you would have gotten...
And we would the entire time at the beach when
if I was
you were making me drinks and sipping them. Yeah. Okay, fine. I guess I'm already infected.
You probably are from 2 weeks ago.
That's cool.
If at all.
But yeah.
Other than that, I'm tired. Kind of bummed out. I'm not able to hit my numbers running like I'm supposed to. And I spend a lot of time running, so if I'm not doing well, it's really quickly feels like a waste of time.
Yeah.
my personality type, right? I'm chasing those trophies. If I'm not playing games that get me trophies, I'm wasting my time.
Right.
If I'm not running and hitting numbers and making progress, I'm wasting my time. It's a terrible way to be.
You should just be better.
Yeah.
I'll do it in my Kratos voice if that makes you... Boy, you must be better.
Don't look dumb, young man.
Yeah.
But we did go to the beach.
That was
awesome.
It was so awesome, and I'm sad to be back at work because I enjoyed beach time.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
We had a blast.
Yeah. By the time our listeners listen to this, it'll be like 2 weeks later, and we'll be over it. But yeah, it was fun. Video game news, some interesting things.
Oh, a whole bunch of stuff
since
dropped.
the last time that we've talked. The big ones I want to hit are PlayStation has finally decided to play nice.
That's your biggest topic right off the bat?
That's the one I want to talk about first so that we can get it out of the way.
Okay.
PlayStation, finally announced that they were going to allow cross-platform play with Fortnite for Xbox and Switch players, so it's in beta testing now to make sure everything's kosher.
Just like shadow dropped it.
Yeah.
Boom.
Yeah. So that's kind of cool.
Okay.
That's like a victory for the internet who strong-armed them into playing nice. But I think it's a victory for all gamers because it allows us to possibly, it's one step closer to a cross-platform future that is equitable for everyone.
Yeah, something
or
we
at
talked
least,
about on the show before too. So.
Yeah, at least maybe
to
fewer crappy practices might happen.
Yeah.
Now that kind of last bastion has fallen. We'll see with the next gen, but in the meantime, that's kind of a cool win. The other big thing you want to talk about, the actual big one,
Telltale Games, I guess, is closed or closing.
Are closing, yeah.
Yeah. Out of nowhere, their employees received a notification they have to leave the building in 30 minutes, pack up all your stuff, and go. And they kept a small skeleton crew of 25 to finish up what are they called, quote, like committed projects or commitments or whatever they had to do, and that was it.
Yeah, it's crazy because Telltale's been such a giant.
Yeah, these are the developers that they started with like their original IP, Wolf Among Us. That's kind of what got them popular.
It's not an original IP. It was based off of a graphic novel.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
I thought it was theirs.
Nope. It was based off a graphic novel. Now, granted, they were the first to adapt it into anything. Into anything, like any kind of medium, but it definitely was a published graphic novel.
Is that all it was?
Yeah.
Okay. So, yeah, and then after that, they grabbed IP from other stuff. So they had Batman, they had Back to the Future, they had Jurassic Park, they got
Borderlands,
and
Game
Guardians of the Galaxy.
Yeah.
And their biggest IP was Walking Dead.
Yeah.
And they were in the middle of making Walking Dead 2
or
whatever.
And their Walking Dead is also based off of the graphic novel, not the TV show, which is a big point of, because again, Wolf Among Us is a graphic novel as well. Okay. So it's a big kind of point of, like, they began by adapting graphic novels.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So.
And they're kind of like point-and-click adventure games. So it's very dialogue-driven. You make dialogue choices, and you kind of just like point at stuff on the screen, interact with things. It's very like not action, not platformer, not really any RPG or character developments. It really is. Their style of games is just like playing a story.
Yeah,
really it is.
Exactly.
But I thought they were doing.
But they
really
did
well.
they made good. A lot of people really like their stuff, so it's kind of so we can get more into the controversies and all of the crap that has happened to them. But we didn't want to mention it so that we can kind of we can stay with the times. Stay on top of it.
For everyone who worked there. Like 200 some employees laid off that went to work that day, right in the middle. Like they have families and kids.
Yeah, it's really sad for anyone. It's really sad for everyone. It's sad for their fans. It's sad for the employees.
Yeah.
And it just sucks. So it just sucks to see a good company that make some bad decisions and then have to close. So they're not the first, they're not the only, but they're not going to be the last, but definitely still kind of a sad time. So moment of silence for Telltale. Rest in peace. All right, cool. Since Telltale closing is definitely not our favorite thing,
doing this podcast is our favorite thing. Doing this podcast is our favorite thing.
Let's talk about our favorite thing.
Favorite thing, something cool, quick, and easy, something that sparked our interest throughout the week that we want to talk about today.
Yeah, that we want to catch y'all up on and maybe hopefully give you some inspiration to do something that we enjoy as well. So we might be sharing with you a book, we might be sharing with you a movie or some food that we ate, and with the intention of like, hey, maybe you should try that out too if it sparks your interest.
Ooh, can we share plot devices?
Plot devices?
Yeah.
Like
Christianity.
Anti-heroes?
I don't know, just random.
Christianity's not a plot device.
It can be.
I suppose it can be a plot device.
Yeah. It was in light of our topic
plot
today.
devices, it's more like a tool, like a thing that, like an object that just gets you from one place to another. So like the sonic screwdriver in Doctor Who's a plot device because it's just they kind of use it whenever the plot needs them to.
So the airships in Final Fantasy games are plot devices because it teleports them around?
Yeah, kind of.
Maybe I just don't know what a plot device is.
I don't think you know what a plot device is. Do some research after this. Favorite things. Back to favorite things. What's your favorite
Vibranium.
thing? Yes.
Is that a plot device?
Yes, vibranium is a plot device because especially with the way it's used in Black Panther because before vibranium was just like a really hard metal that made Captain America's shield and there was only a little bit of it. And then Black Panther comes out and it's like, oh, it's a magic metal that allows like spaceships to float and us to make like super powerful stupid vibranium.
Kinetic energy absorbing armor.
Yeah.
That's Black Panther's
which kind of sounds like what vibranium should be doing, but like it shouldn't necessarily make supercomputers and like crazy intelligent AI and like nanotech is not necessarily like the basic properties of vibranium being able to absorb energy and release it is not necessarily going to cause like magic flying spaceships.
Welcome to the Obscure Marvel Technology Podcast.
Vibranium. I loved Black Panther, but vibranium its usage in that movie specifically frustrated me.
It's not my favorite thing.
Okay. What's your favorite thing?
Well, I had 3. And I was going to base that on what you said.
Okay.
Because all 3 of them came from our beach trip. So if you don't have 3 and you want to talk about the beach, then you got to go first.
Okay.
I can pivot.
I specifically went for 1.
Okay.
My favorite thing was the waves of the Outer Banks.
Yeah, that was one of my 3.
Oh my lord. I don't know if it was because of Hurricane Florence or what.
Something.
Or maybe it's just the waves of the Outer Banks. I just haven't been to the Outer Banks in a long time.
I think it was a Sharknado was coming.
Yeah, something. It was awesome. It was the most fun I've had playing in the ocean. Now, granted, I also since I've been married, the only times I've been to the ocean have been with my wife. And I love my wife, but everything that comes before but's bullcrap. I do love my wife. The only problem is that when we're at the beach together, we have the exact opposite desired behaviors. My wife wants to sit on the beach with a book and tan the entire time we're there and not talk or do anything. I want to play. I want to play Can Jam. I want to like run on the beach. I want to play in the water, and she never wants to do that stuff with me. So part of the reason I wanted to go to the beach with friends in the first place was to play in the ocean with someone. So part of that was I got to play in the water with Termite, but
I'm glad you didn't talk about that as being an expectation because I didn't even know that you were like holding that desire, and I just did it because I enjoyed the same thing.
Yeah, I figured.
And it was very real. It was very organic.
Yeah,
like, let's go play in the ocean.
Play in the ocean, and it just happened to be like. Again, the waves just happened to be like big and powerful and crazy. It was like a workout, though, like a full body workout. Like I just got let the waves like crash me all over the place, and it was so much fun. So I was like a ragdoll the entire time, but it was the most fun I've ever had as a ragdoll.
Yep.
Yeah,
slammed into the sand, turned all around every which way. You know, your feet get kicked out from under you, and then you get kind of smashed, but then your head gets picked up.
Yeah, there's one point where you were body surfing one of the waves and coming straight for me, and I was like, "There's no way he's gonna." Oh my god! I'm pretty sure you ran into me, and it was awesome. It was good fun. So Penguin and Termite had a blast at the beach, and that's my favorite thing.
And my favorite thing about the beach trip was the tiki bar.
Yeah,
how awesome was that?
Yeah, it was sweet. Our house that we were staying at had a pool, and then on the other end of the pool from the house was a tiki bar, like a straight up
a full decked out bar,
and with air conditioning and like coolers and refrigerators. It was
had the freezer with the slide open the top, so I could put blenders of drinks in there and they don't melt. And then they had the refrigerator; we could put all of the ingredients, juices and limes and stuff. And there's 2 countertops to lay out all the stuff I needed. We had plenty of room for storage. I laid out a whole sandwich bar. We all made sandwiches.
Yeah,
I was making drinks for everyone.
He's using all 6 of his arms to.
He was having a blast.
To bartend.
I was bartending and making sandwiches.
Termite's perfect for bartending.
Yes.
With his 6 arms. Yeah.
I have 6? Cool. I thought it was... Yeah, 6. I'm an insect.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I guess you're using only 4 of your arms, but still, that's twice as many arms as the penguins have.
Hey, it looked like I was doing that.
That's basically how I felt.
Grabbing bottles and scooping ice, and it was awesome, man. I had a blast.
Uh-huh.
And it was it was a really good place to congregate, to hang out and like talk. And like I'm actually envious of kitchens that have islands where you can sit on the other side of it and talk to family in the kitchen, because we just have a wall in our kitchen and I can't there's nowhere for me to sit and talk to my wife while she's cooking dinner or vice versa. And so like The tiki bar was perfect.
Yeah.
Let's have lunch. Okay. Well, instead of sending someone to the kitchen to disappear for 2 hours to make sandwiches,
right.
It's like we're all hanging out together.
Yeah.
I'm asking what everybody wants on sandwiches. We're all just doing it.
People can swim or
we're
sit there and sunbathe or read a book or whatever who aren't interested in engaging. Like, it's really great. Yeah.
It was so good.
Yeah. I really want to maybe consider next year getting that beach house again.
That would be
the
awesome.
Bar was cool.
It was amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Kitty Hawk, North Carolina.
That's where it was.
Yep. Did you have another favorite thing? Because you said you had 3.
Playing Castlevania on the NES Classic.
Oh, yeah.
That was pretty sweet.
Fun. Yeah, we didn't actually finish it. We didn't actually get that much video game time, though.
Yeah, we didn't.
So, but it's cool.
I told you
It's
that time
fun.
would blink.
Beach. Yeah.
Time would go by.
Yeah. That's crazy. All right, let's move on to our next segment, which is DLC. As we got closer to this DLC, I got more excited about it because we haven't done one of these in a while. We haven't actually. We've only done this once, and this was like the original concept for DLC. So we're gonna do another, and it just slipped my mind.
Who would win in a
Who
contest?
would win in a blank? So the blank is we will fill in the blank, but. Part of the fun, part of the downloadableness of this content is that he'll come up with one part of it, I'll come up with the other. We don't know who's got what in their head, but we also have to pick it now. So we are set in. He has picked his contest. I have picked my character. So what we're doing is who would win in a blank, and in the who, since we're talking about religions, we're going to do 2 fictional deities.
2 fictional deities.
And
the contest is, what do you think of when someone's like, oh, the nectar of the gods?
Coffee.
Exactly. So which of the 2 deities can make the best coffee?
Ooh, okay. The 2 deities are Thanos from Marvel's Cinematic Universe, so specifically Josh Brolin's Thanos, not even the one from the comics, or Raiden from Mortal Kombat.
That's awesome. Yeah. Okay,
so let's discuss it.
All right, well, Thanos has the Reality Stone, so he can make you perceive your exact best coffee-flavored receptors.
Right, but he's also a genocidal maniac, so he probably would use the coffee to try to murder you.
Yeah, he might. And
so he would make
Raiden,
like death coffee.
I feel like we just like lightning the fruit to roast it immediately in electricity, and it would give it an entirely unique taste.
Like a roasty, also kind of ionized taste. Yeah.
Like, here's the raw beans. Zap, now they're roasted coffee beans.
Right.
Zap, now they're grinded.
Right.
Ground? Who can use English?
Grinded.
And then we'd make coffee from it, and it would taste burnt, but maybe have some weird ionization stuff happening. Maybe it'll be like Pop Rocks. Coffee Pop Rocks.
Yeah. Although also Thanos has the Space Stone, allowing him to travel to all different parts of the universe to gather ingredients to make coffee. That's pretty. Who knows what kind of crazy ingredients like make coffee that'll blow your mind? You know. So that's pretty. I mean, I would say Thanos has a strong advantage. Yeah. But I also don't trust Thanos.
Right.
I trust Raiden. He's like a good thunder god. Like thunder gods are hit or miss. You got on one hand you got Thor, and you're like, yeah, Thor, thunder god. On the other hand you have Zeus, and you're like, Zeus, please don't do terrible things to me because you're Zeus. And you think with a body part that's not your brain. But Raiden's like a good thunder god. I'm like, yeah, Raiden, thunder god.
He's looking out for everybody. He's trying to save the world.
He's trying to save the world from Shao Kahn. Like that's I like have more of inherent trust, but he's also a one-trick pony.
You know, in the movie, they're all on a boat for the first time. They all meet each other, and Sonya looks at Raiden and she goes, "So a handful of people on a leaky boat are going to save the world." And Raiden looks at her with lightning eyes and goes, "Exactly." I just thought that was awesome.
Yeah. Who was he played by? Wasn't he played by
a familiar person?
Stick. Like, isn't he the same actor who played Stick in
You
Daredevil?
Just blew my mind. Are you serious?
I don't know. I'm having a hard time picturing, but in my mind, I'm picturing him as like a younger Stick.
We have to look this up right now. This is like, no way. No way.
Because if it is him, like, it's perfect. Like,
well, I was going to go into a discussion about how Raiden is a martial artist. He's very disciplined. He's very, like, controlled and inner focused and calm. And he can probably come up with the most meticulous method that only he would be able to repeat.
Right, and the very, like, Eastern mysticism, like,
with his coffee.
So he's got that,
And so he would be, like, super consistent, very unique. And whereas Thanos is just, like, explosions.
Oh, but Thanos has got the willpower, man. He's not just explosions. His whole thing is like he's determined. He's the only one who is determined. So like when he sets his mind to something, he's going to give it 110% just like he did to genociding the entire universe. You know what I mean? So, like, if he had put the same amount of determination in making coffee as he did into genociding the universe, like, it would be some pretty good coffee.
You would think. But maybe he would just put a whole bunch of zeal into something and then it sucks. It's like the weightlifter who's like, I'm going to be Arnold. And he goes and grabs like a 400-pound bench and he can't lift it. But he just tries it every day.
Right.
He tries the hardest maximum weight. You'll never get there unless you do all of the discipline work underneath.
I would say Thanos is pretty disciplined.
I'm determined. I'm going to lift this.
He's pretty disciplined, too. I mean, he beat up the Hulk. So, like, just in a fist fight. It requires a fair amount of discipline to beat up the Hulk in a fist fight. Without the stones.
The Hulk is the epitome of just rage and no discipline.
That's why you need discipline to beat him.
Yeah. Yeah. Christopher Lambert is the guy who played Raiden in Mortal Kombat.
Oh, yeah, he looks nothing like Stick.
It's not.
Made that
it
up.
does look like Stick, though. I can see why you said that.
Yeah, that's fine.
But you did make it up.
Yeah.
The latest thing he's been in was Bel Canto.
I don't know what that is.
I don't even either.
That's okay. Moving on, let's sort of in conclusion, are we going to disagree on this one or are we going to come to an agreement? Who would win who would win?
I would say Raiden.
You would say Raiden?
Yeah.
I'd say Thanos.
Thanos gonna kill you.
So
you're gonna die.
He is. It's fine. It's not a who would make the best coffee and then I would survive. It's
who would make the best
coffee.
coffee.
Make the best coffee. And I think that objectively Thanos' coffee would blow my mind right before it turned me to dust. All right, that's fine. Listeners, tell us what you think. Who would make better coffee, Thanos or Raiden? Are there any other deities out there that you think would also make great coffee? Fictional deities, not real deities.
Fictional deities.
So if any fictional deities out there that you think would make just the greatest coffee in the world, I would specifically like to hear our buddy Ryan's thoughts on this as a Starbucks manager. What fictional deity do you want to make you coffee?
Let us know.
And let us know on social media.
You can find us at 80bitpodsmash.com. There you will find links to our Google Play and iTunes RSS feeds to subscribe easily there. We're also on Spotify and Stitcher. You can also find links to our Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and Reddit. We are 80-Bit Podsmash across all of those social media platforms. No hyphens, no capitalizations, or funny business. So please go there. Go to iTunes, give us a star rating, leave a little comment about how we're doing, give us some feedback so we can better curate our content for you. Please go on Facebook and share us. Click that share button and actually tell your friends that you like something we may have said. If you want to talk to your friends about who makes the best coffee, you just hit that share.
Yeah.
And I'll say Ryan makes the best coffee because he's...
Is he your coffee god?
Yes.
Is he your fictional coffee god?
He's fictional. And yeah, those are the two best things you can do to help us out to grow our audience so that we can better provide content for you.
Yeah, sweet. All right. Shall we get into it then? Shall we get into the thick of it?
Talk about what kind of theologies or philosophies are present in video games.
Yeah. Why don't you start? So the way the format, for those who are interested, the way the kind of format's going to look is we're going to talk about some like big picture philosophies or theologies that show up in video games, and then we're going to we're going to talk about some examples, like what examples. So we'll give you some like, this video game is an example of that. We'll kind of talk about the characteristics and what makes this, what kind of categorize what we mean by each theology, and then we'll just kind of like, why do we think it's interesting? So we'll kind of analyze it as well. So a little bit of a different format than what you might be used to.
Yeah.
So I kind of wanted to break it down. So our first example, Termite, you kind of talked about that, like, so this whole episode was kind of inspired by your thoughts on this particular specific theology. So
as you guys
let's
may
go
know,
ahead and break it down. Or you go ahead and break it down.
I am a massive JRPG fan. I love Japanese RPGs. Most of them, especially the older ones from older generations, have the idea of God killers. And that's the theological topic, philosophy we're going to discuss.
Yeah.
Is God killers. So what this means, if for more modern games like God of War or God Eater, notable characteristics are usually a polytheistic mentality, but the gods are mortal. So there's multiple gods and they can all die. And then you have like a protagonist that wants to overthrow them, who wants to kill them, take them down, and maybe take their spot.
Yeah. The only real, I was trying to see if there's like a term for this. Like I was trying to see if there's some kind of like scholarly term that people had talked about, because obviously this is like a common idea. You find it in lots of different fiction, is this idea that there are gods and these gods can be killed. Because the other thing too is like the use of the word mortality or immortality is really loose in fiction because they'll say, I am an immortal, but then they can be killed.
Right.
So it's almost like, okay, well, immortal only means that you won't die of old age. Like elves. That's like elves in like fantasy elves.
They can still be killed, but
they can be killed, but they just don't die of old age. And so that's what they mean by immortal.
Interesting.
But like the actual word mortal means you die, like you won't die.
Right.
So it's really interesting to me, so anyways, the term I found, though, the only term that really like I thought fit this, that wasn't just God killer, is deicide.
Oh.
So just like
wipe them all out.
Patricide, well, it's not even like just, homicide.
Oh,
so you can,
right.
even if you kill one god, you've committed deicide.
I was thinking to wipe them all out because of genocide. But that means wiping a gene.
A whole, it means,
which implies by just that word.
An ethnic group.
Yeah, an ethnic group, which would be them all. Or you can
in fact, actually, technically what Thanos did was not genocide, but it's the only kind of category we have for it. What he did was, like, mass homicide. Like, random homicide. But yeah, so if you kill one god, you commit deicide, but the idea... like the intellectual category we have for like someone who's a god killer is a deicide or whatever. So anyways,
so I did some research about why Japanese RPGs have this kind of mentality kind of woven through them, and I stumbled upon this great article which I will link off into the notes. And I don't even know if this guy is credible, but the arguments seemed sound to me, and of course you can poke holes in any argument, he was saying take a look at Japanese culture in general, and like way back in the 16th, 17th, and 18th century. And I'm trying to be factual. None of this stuff is like any speculation or opinions. So if I do misspeak or if I'm wrong about anything I've read, I am totally up to being corrected. I'm not like dying on a sword here. So the idea was that Japan was always very isolated and secluded in their early days. And so they didn't have feeds out to other countries. They didn't have trade waters and open trade and stuff. So they weren't influenced. On the opposite is that they weren't influenced by outsiders either. In the 17th century, the Christians started coming around and to their place and started spreading Christianity. And that was a very Western thing that came with Western culture and Western ways. And so they were offended by that and actually were suspicious of it and kind of shut it out. Like as a government, the culture is like, no, we're not doing this. And then later on, like the 100 years or so goes by in the 18th century, and then Christianity starts being allowed to be publicly portrayed again, along with the Western stuff that comes with it. So there's like all this background. You can fast forward to like World War II, and we have like this very Western like giant come in and wreck their towns, and that's World War II factual dropping the A-bombs on Japan. It's a horrible event, but that happened. And so we have this mentality of like, we're just trying to preserve the culture that we have, and we have all these fighting influences coming in and wrecking us. And so they seem to be like this oppressive. Now we're going to talk about video games. So the Japanese video games have like mostly a culture about an oppressive force. And they want to overthrow this for the good of the people. Yeah. And so it's always about the good of the people, or creating a better society, or creating a better world. And so they have these deities that are there that need to be overthrown because them coming down would benefit the world.
Yeah, it's also, I mean, it's interesting too because Japanese culture, if you look at their history, they're often considered a borrowing culture. Like they borrowed a lot of cultural elements from China and Korea and Taiwan, some of their neighbors. And now they borrow a lot of cultural elements from America.
Right. Hey, now that's flipped on its head with their isolationism.
Right. Yeah. So, but it's like, in a lot of ways, like, these gods, they're simultaneously our own. I'm speaking as a quote unquote Japanese person. They are simultaneously our own gods and also not our own gods. Yeah. So like they can be killed and we can replace them. But at the same time, there's also sort of a sense of ownership of them, but you definitely see that a lot in JRPGs. You see it a lot but even so, you see it a lot in American culture too. There's a book called American Gods by Neil Gaiman that I recently read, and it's all about gods dying. It relies on a principle called the Tinkerbell effect. Are you familiar with the Tinkerbell effect?
I'm not familiar with this.
You know how in Peter Pan, Tinkerbell, if you stop believing in fairies, she dies?
I did not know that.
Oh, that's part of the Tinkerbell.
Okay.
Yeah, so the Tinkerbell effect is deities only exist because
people believe in them.
So in American Gods, the gods become stronger the more people believe in them and become harder to kill.
Yeah.
As a result of that, and they're consequently become easier to kill. when fewer people believe in them. So the story kind of focuses, the kind of main god you're following around is Odin. He's not the primary POV character, but he's like the main god, and he's like a grifter now, just like wandering around America. Anyways, so that's just as just kind of a side note. But the big video game you see this god killing is like the most popular video game in the Western market that you see this in is God of War.
Yeah.
Which is really like, especially the early games were just like
going after all of the Greek gods.
Fantasy. Yeah. And it was like a rage fantasy. It was all about, it was both a revenge and rage fantasy. But again, you can also see sort of the American roots in the idea of like religion, organized religion sort of represents oppression and stuff like that. And so the sort of fantasy that's being lived out by these deicidal games is like, we are literally killing these gods, these oppressive forces.
Yeah.
So it's actually interesting that even despite Japanese isolationism, it's a shared.
Well, that was just their early stuff. They let Christians come in.
Yeah.
Another aspect of JRPGs that's kind of interesting is you start off weak, level 1, like you have your RPG elements, so your characters level up as you go.
Yeah.
So you have like your cloth tunic and your wooden sword at level 1. And then by the time you're at the end of the game, you have like space armor and like this sword from who knows what was made by these legendary you have these crazy gear, and you're leveled up powerfully, you have all these abilities and all this stuff, and so you feel like you're ready to take on the next thing. And they usually do start you off with like, I'm going to beat the owner of this town, and then I'm going to beat the ruler of this area, and then I'm going to beat the ruler of the world. And there's always an antagonist, obviously, that's bigger, and then eventually it's the representation of what a god could be, and then you have to fight that. So there's no one else higher than that powerful thing. Let's kill that and make the world a better place. Yeah.
Cool. Speaking of making the world a better place, let's move on to our next philosophy. American Exceptionalism.
Hey!
So this one's not so much a theology, though one could argue that it is. But this is definitely a philosophy I see pop up in video games all the time, even if it's sort of in subtle ways. And definitely in that sort of like mid 2000s range of video games. There's a lot of American Exceptionalism.
That makes sense. 2001 was a massive hit to
exactly.
And so our obvious response was not overcompensating, but like coming back and saying, no, we are America. It's a patriotism that was kind of rooted in 9/11.
Right. So some examples, I think a lot of the sort of Call of Duties and Battlefields, the fact that you're playing an American soldier, it's always America can do no wrong. I think they've sort of explored that in some of the later games. I haven't really played a Call of Duty in forever, so I don't actually know what the campaigns are really exploring these days, but I know they have explored that, idea. Nevertheless, it's kind of any kind of action, shoot 'em up, whatever, whether it's Rambo or Call of Duty, it's going to.
Gears of War and Halo did the same thing.
Yeah, it's going to be basically, American Exceptionalism is going to be playing through. Another game that kind of is sort of a counterpoint of American Exceptionalism, where it sort of like criticizes it, is BioShock Infinite.
Yes,
though it does it, by criticizing it, it portrays it nevertheless. So you get a really good picture as to what I think that of all those games I just talked about, the one that actually most clearly depicts American Exceptionalism is BioShock Infinite.
Yeah, so it's so good. And BioShock Infinite's set around, what would you call it, like the early onset of the American...
It would be turn of the century. It would be like 1990, 1910s.
So post-Civil War.
Yes, post-Civil War, during Reconstruction, also turn of the century, so like the sort of downfall of the Victorian Empire and sort of building up to World War I would be the actual setting.
When's the Industrial Revolution?
Industrial Revolution was way, way sooner. Industrial Revolution was like 1800s, mid-1800s, yeah.
All right, trying to get my history. I know the Civil War ended in 1865, so I was trying to figure out what...
Industrial Revolution happened and fueled the Civil War.
Okay.
That's part of the reason why the Civil War happened, was because of the Industrial Revolution. So the turn of the century was, after that kind of bloodshed and sort of like seeing the benefits of the Industrial Revolution was the start of that. But before the other downfall of the Industrial Revolution, which was World War I and II. So, but
BioShock Infinite had this weird kind of like cultish version of Christianity that was like super oppressive, not oppressive, but manipulative.
Both. It was both. Yeah.
Like everyone obeyed this one old dude.
It was very much the sort of like cliche Southern Baptist Ku Klux Klan. Like, granted, Sobos, as they're called, the Southern Baptist as an organized religion has made incredible strides forward in the last, but they have also been. They also have just sort of, there are certain civil rights issues that they have dragged their feet on for the past you know, long time, and so a lot of that kind of comes through.
It was actually
history. So.
Some controversy with BioShock Infinite and the way that they depicted baptisms, and it caused them to actually change it. So the final version of the game isn't what was originally there.
Interesting.
And I need to dive deeper into what it was.
I would like to know what it was. Yeah, because it was still pretty. I mean, they basically
they drown people.
They basically you basically get held underwater, your character and it's a first person shooter, so it's everything's from the point of view you're looking at it as if you would be looking at it if you were there. And the beginning of the game, they freaking hold you underwater until you pass out, basically drowning you. And then they also drown you at the end of the game too. So spoiler alert, I guess, but there's
you don't know why or how or
there's
whom,
also like implications of the drowning. So
I want to play that game again so bad.
Oh, it's so good. Yeah, I bet it looks beautiful on the BioShock collection too on the PS4 because I played it on my PC. It actually looked worse on my PC than the remastered version of BioShock 1 and 2.
Oh my.
Yeah. So, because I mean, I don't have the remastered version of Infinite. I got Infinite when it came out.
I don't know if they remastered Infinite. I think they just ported it from PC to
really?
Yeah.
Are you sure they didn't remaster it for the PS4?
They didn't remaster it. They just ported the PC version over.
Oh, I bet it still looks better than it does on my PC.
Well, it depends on your computer.
Yeah. Anyways, the sort of what American exceptionalism is, you know, we've kind of hit on it, but it's this idea that America's the best.
Right.
That our country, it's a sort of extreme version of just patriotism. Like patriotism, it's fine to be like, you know, respecting your country, but the reason I kind of include it in these theologies is because in a lot of ways, American exceptionalism is the worship of America. You are saying like, you know, and you hear, I mean, there's whole cultures that are rooted in American exceptionalism, that kind of are all like, you know, America is the best, America can do no wrong.
Yeah.
We as a country are sort of just better, are a class of people above the rest of the world. And it definitely is not a very realistic view, but it's in video games, especially like I said, during that mid-2000s. Again, when every Call of Duty you're playing, you never have the moment where you're questioning whether or not the terrorists have, you know, legit motivations for what they're trying to do. No, you just shoot them and don't feel bad about it.
Right.
Like that's American exceptionalism. When you say like, because I am American, I have a right to shoot you because you are trying to hurt the thing that you're trying to hurt my country. Like it's never an examination of like, oh, we're trying to figure out why exactly we're trying, you know, and again, even in storytelling, you can consider complex character motivations. Like there's a lot of characters. Baldur is a great example. Speaking of games of gods and God of War, like Baldur is a great example. You feel bad for him by the time you learn like what's going on. So like there's a way to tell a story where you're not undermining your protagonist's like character development while still not including this sort of like.
Would you say that's
American
a criticism of like the makers of these games? Like, do you think?
No, because I think they're a product of their culture.
Okay.
I think that if you look at Hollywood, there's a lot. I mean, it's getting better.
I'd say it's
but
getting a lot
all
better.
of the movies that I grew up with were American exceptionalism. Die Hard is a story about American exceptionalism. You know what I mean? So it's kind of just a product of our culture, and it's okay in a lot of ways. Like patriotism, you kind of have to like write stories from a point of view. You have to have bad guys. A lot of stories, rather, you have to have bad guys that are kind of just one-dimensional bad guys, and so it's easy to paint them as Soviets or terrorists or you know, if you're looking at freaking The Patriot with Mel Gibson, the British are these like one-dimensional British bad guys. Like it's like I love the British, man. They make the British baking show and Doctor Who. But you know, but they're the bad, evil, oppressive British. Where like if you actually look at the historical like perspective,
why should a tiny island across the sea regulate the price of tea?
Right. My favorite thing is if you actually look at the British side of it, it's straight up. It's like we dragged the British into a war with the French. And then when they asked us to help pay for that war, we're like, how dare you tax us more? We'll throw your tea into the water. So like really from the British perspective, America threw a hissy fit.
They tax us relentlessly. Then King George runs around and spending spree.
Yes, thank you, Hamilton. Thank you, Lin-Manuel Miranda, for joining us on this podcast. By the way, Termite is Lin-Manuel Miranda.
Hey, who knew? If only I had a 12th of his money.
Right.
I would be set for life.
Yeah. So it's just interesting. I think that it's just kind of crazy that philosophy shows up. Do you have anything else you wanted to add, or do you want to?
I was thinking about the idea of an American going to a foreign land and doing everything better. Like, what do you call that?
Oh yeah.
Is there any video games that do that?
It's kind of a. I don't know what the actual term is, but I see it as kind of a cultural appropriation thing. The biggest example that drives me nuts is Iron Fist.
Right.
He's this spoiled white rich kid who goes to Asia and does Asia better than the Asians do.
But
Doctor
if you
Strange
go
kind of does
back
it too.
to season 2 of Iron Fist,
Sure.
There's a little bit more nuance to what happened, and it actually debunks
interesting.
that.
Okay, well, maybe I'll have to watch Iron Fist season 2 now.
It's so good. I loved it.
You're the only person I know who likes Iron Fist.
Off the air, I will spoil it for you if you'd like.
No, it's fine. Well, maybe. I don't care. It's fine. I do like... but, I will even be like... I fall victim to this too because I love Doctor Strange, and that's essentially what Doctor Strange is too.
Oh, is it?
Yeah, he goes to Asia and learns Asian magic and does Asian magic, but he becomes Sorcerer Supreme in only a few months.
Doctor Strange does the same thing, right?
That's exactly what I just said. Doctor Strange.
What did you say?
Doctor Strange.
What did I think you said?
I don't know. Maybe Doctor Who, but not Doctor Who because Doctor Who's an
No,
alien.
I was thinking of what's the Dexter? Why would I think of Dexter? I was thinking of Dexter.
Batman does it too. Batman goes and at least in Batman Begins, he goes and learns ninja-mancy was
I have no idea. I need to watch Batman Begins
ninjutsu.
again.
He goes and learns
from Qui-Gon Jinn.
From Qui-Gon. Well, Qui-Gon Jinn. He's a white dude.
Yeah.
But he learns it from all these, and then he does it better than the Asians.
Right.
Like that's totally, that's essentially American exceptionalism. Just
in the movies, but
different.
Are there video games that do that?
Oh, I don't know.
I can't think of any off the top of my head.
I can't think of any off the top of my head either, but they're out. They got to be out there.
Yeah.
So give us some examples, guys. What's The Last Samurai? It's another movie, but still.
With Tom Cruise?
Yeah. Goes and
I loved that movie.
I did too.
Yeah.
That's the thing is like, just because, so I'll be the first to admit, just because we're not sitting here criticizing necessarily saying that just because this theology or philosophies in a game means it's bad. No, God of War is one of my favorite games, despite the fact that it's a God killer.
Yeah.
And kind of undermines the idea of
and I love Japanese
what a
RPGs.
God is. Yeah. And same thing with American exceptionalism. Just because it has American exceptionalism doesn't mean that I hate the game. Like, I love the game or I love the movie. Like, still, it's just a thing. We're just observing how it's interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Cool. Let's move on to the next one. This is a favorite topic of mine. I could talk about this as a whole podcast.
Forever.
I'll try to keep it brief.
An entire podcast, entire weekly podcast.
We can have an entire weekly podcast dedicated to free will versus determinism. Determinism, for those who don't know, it's a philosophical, I specifically chose the atheistic philosophical idea but it's the same thing. It's as predestination or destiny or fate, whatever you want to call it. It's the idea that we as humans determine our choices determine our futures and our lives versus the idea that no, your life is determined by an outside force independent of your choices. So essentially it's the idea that you either have a choice or you don't have a choice and you just kind of do it. So again, we won't dive too deep into this, but we'll talk about some examples of games that explore it. So there's two that I wrote down. I think there are more for sure, but the two that I wrote down is I think that Detroit Become Human is an exploration of free will, even in the way that the gameplay is, versus BioShock 1 specifically is definitely a criticism of even the idea of free will in video games. So it's very a deterministic type of game. So
Detroit Become Human kind of opens up the idea. I'm going to not jump into this hole too bad, but Westworld explores it too with this whole idea of androids and like them becoming sentient beings, and so like they're programmed, they're robots, they have their life determined by their creators, i.e. humans, right? So you've created this AI, artificial intelligence, android to clean your house and to take care of your family while you're gone. And so they cook, clean, and they're here. They finally realize that you are an oppressive jerk and that you treat your family like crap, and they don't like it and or are scared, and then they take their kids from that person. This is just one example in Detroit.
Yeah.
And then they become sentient, so they completely break their code, and they go on their own and start making their own decisions. And so that I've always butted up and never really related to the idea that androids can do that because they're computers and they're not programmed to do that. So there's no way they can. And also the over affection or over compassion that it's drawing from its audience, us. That we should have compassion for these robots, computers, because they kind of represent real life, but I don't think they're actually real life. I'm like, why would you cry because your computer crashed? You just go buy another one. So an android is obviously a way more fancy computer, but you can buy them. There's a whole store in Detroit, and like Westworld, they just rebuild them. Who cares if they die? I don't care.
But again, so there's two things I want to hit on. So actually three things. The first thing is that the gameplay, I was more kind of talking about how the gameplay in Detroit really, I guess you're right. The story also is an exploration of free will. Yeah. But
the gameplay allows you to make your own choices.
Yeah, but your choices, exactly. If you let someone die and literally the whole timeline of the game will change. So
it's really cool and really well done.
There are multiple endings. So that's really what the idea of, essentially bottom line of like free will, the philosophy of free will is that like, oh, at the end of the day, like there's multiple outcomes to any given choice. Whereas determinism says, no, there's only ever one outcome. Yeah.
Right.
So that's, but that's, again, that's evident in the gameplay of Detroit. What
It's
you're
also
hitting
in the
on
plot.
is sort of the philosophy of like, what is it to be human? Like, what is it to like,
Yeah, I guess
if I were a computer but had the ability to feel emotion and make choices and be aware of myself, that's what sentience is, self-awareness. If I had all of those things, would that make me equal to a biological entity that had the same things? So it's an incredible, amazing philosophy.
Yeah.
Not quite an exploration of like theology though. Like not quite an exploration of like, is there a God?
I see.
So I don't want to, like, I think that it's still incredibly interesting, especially considering that, yes, part of that is choice, like
Right.
the ability to choose. And so the fact that they are able to choose to break their code is a statement about free will.
Right. That's what I was getting at. That's exactly what I was getting at.
Yep. That's yeah, exactly. So.
I mean, in Bioshock 1 is the
Bioshock
opposite.
1's the counterpoint, because what you get to a point where you think you're making choices. The entire time you think that the story, like the way
main
that the
character
story,
in the story, Jack DeWitt.
Is it DeWitt? Really?
I think so, yeah.
That's Booker DeWitt is in Bioshock Infinite.
Man, you always...
I have a really good memory. The only reason if you were right that it was Jack DeWitt, then I was going to say that they're related, and that's awesome, but I don't think they are. It's Jack Ryan, because it
You're
would
right,
be Andrew Ryan.
Yep.
Yeah. Anyway, so that's a bit of a spoiler, but anyways, you think that the entire time that like specifically like the character is like just helping out, trying to help out this world that he's kind of run into that is, in chaos. But at the end of the game, you find out that all of your choices were because you are programmed, like you were raised as a child to respond to the word, like you were abused as a child and taught to respond to a trigger word, basically, that was, would you kindly? So as the entire time, like the characters, this is big spoilers for Bioshock, by the way, but it's
spoilers.
like a 15-year-old game, so get over yourself and play the game already. But so like the character says, the other character who you think you're helping the entire time, he's been asking you the entire time, would you kindly do this? Would you kindly do this? And those have been orders. So it's fascinating because you get to the end of the game and you run into the person who ends up being your father, Andrew Ryan, who you thought's the bad guy the entire time. And he says, would you kindly pick up that golf club? Would you kindly kill me? And like, it goes into basically a cinematic. You have no control over the character, and he kills his dad. You don't have a choice. You can't do anything. Yep. The only choice the game gives you is whether or not to save the
new girls,
little
or
sisters.
harvest them.
Or harvest them.
Yeah.
So I guess in that way, it kind of subverts the idea, making it a fascinating discussion.
Right.
Nonetheless, but it is just, again, I think it's a commentary because you can't, like, I think it's a commentary on video games in general, because you can't, at the end of the day, everything's still predetermined for you. We've talked about this.
Yeah, in
we
our
talked
art
about
conversation, like episode 1.
Oh, we talked about this also in our conversation recently about, like, open world games. Even in open world games,
you're still limited.
You're still limited to predetermined decisions. So like everything is laid out for you, and it doesn't matter what order you find it in. You're still just following a script.
Right.
So that's what's just kind of, there's very few games other than, like, again, Minecraft, I think, is the only true game that's truly free will, because you literally can do whatever you want. You can go chop down that tree. I chop down that tree. There are both simultaneously consequences and not consequences. Like, you're not missing out on anything, though. You're just doing it. So that's so it's just kind of, I think Bioshock is fascinating, because when I was playing that game, I was like, oh my gosh, you're right. I couldn't choose to do anything else.
Yeah. When
he says, would you kindly do this?
I'm gonna do that.
Not only am I gonna do that, but like the game won't let me do anything else, because I have to go follow the objectives. So it's
any
just
linear game is very much like that.
Exactly. Yeah. So that's why I thought Bioshock was a fascinating counterpoint to free will. All right, cool. We've got a couple other ones. I think I'm gonna skip this one, but I'll mention it anyways. There are a lot of games that bring up that kind of take it from. I would say actually the majority of games in one way or another are atheistic. I mean that in two ways. So they're atheistic either in the fact that they are anti-organized religion. They have some kind of commentary. I think of like Devil May Cry 4 was very, like, there was this sort of religious group that worshipped Sparta, Dante's dad. And they ended up being bad and corrupt and evil. And that's just one example of like, organized religion is bad, and organized religion are the bad guys. And it's a very atheistic worldview, obviously, because the idea is like there is no God, so we shouldn't be organizing and worshiping him. But there's also a lot of games that are just straight up atheistic. Like they don't have anything to do with God. Like a God. I think of like Mario, for example.
Right.
It doesn't even come into play. And that's like there's just that's not part of the worldview of the game. It's not meant to be a game about gods or about religion. It just doesn't have a God, and that's
the atheistic worldview. I wonder if it's rooted in postmodernism.
It is. Oh, it's absolutely rooted. I mean, but it came before postmodernism. Atheism has existed.
Yeah, I know. But I'm saying like video games from like Devil May Cry, like that era, the early aughts, late 90s, when like postmodernism was kind of going nuts. Like all that was the worldview, was anything that was saying you have to believe X to do this was immediately bad.
Yeah.
And so it was just
or all of those who believe this are like this. That's the other thing that's kind of came out of that, is like the sort of like gross generalization of like, oh, if you are a part of this, then again, you're one of those people that we can just kill with impunity because you believe it. You know what I mean? That's kind of that's the weird thing that comes out of these video games. And the thing that, like, again, even though you and I would have already had conversations as to how we don't think video games make people more violent,
right?
It is one of those strange things that you're like, oh, it may not make me want to kill these people more, but it would definitely make me want to think of them as someone who needs to be put down, or someone who needs to be like not listened to and just sort of shut up and shut down. So there is sort of an implication there.
The movie Grandma's Boy, the guy handed the controller to his grandma and wanted her to test this thing, and she's like not knowing what to do, and he's directing her and saying, see that guy, he's a drug dealer, he's bad, and she goes, ooh, drug dealers are bad, die or something really close to that.
That's funny.
And it's just like you were talking about, it's very flat, single, like, what if that drug dealer was doing something for a reason?
Right, yeah.
He's selling drugs because the drug lord kidnapped his mom and has her at gunpoint, and he has no other option.
Nuance.
Yeah, there's no nuance.
There's no exploration of
drug
nuance.
Drug dealers are bad.
Video games, though they can be incredibly nuanced, now they're getting a lot more nuanced.
They are now, yeah.
There definitely was a period of time where it was just like, you
Duke
are
Nukem.
bad. Oh, gosh.
Oh, that was the perfect American exceptionalism.
Yes.
It's Duke Nukem.
Yeah, definitely. All right, the next one, I love this. This is I could criticize this all day, so I'm gonna get into it because it drives me crazy. The next one I want to talk about is dualism, also known as light versus dark. The light versus dark. Now, something that what sets dualism apart from other philosophies, or more importantly, why you wouldn't describe Christianity as a dualistic religion, is dualism is specifically there is a good and there is a bad, and they are both equally strong. Whereas Christianity says God is going to always be stronger than the evil. There is great evil and there is great good, but the good is always stronger than the bad. So, but video games, it's dualism, whether you call it light versus dark, chaos versus order, good versus evil, like this is the other one that's just permeates games. This is the other one that's like in everything. The two biggest examples that drive me crazy are Destiny and World of Warcraft. I'll start with Destiny, my criticism of dualism in Destiny.
Yeah.
I've talked about this before on the podcast, how the original story for Destiny had this incredible like philosophy of like the dark was all about the spirit of competitiveness, and the light was the spirit of cooperation. Essentially, it was like boiled down to it wasn't light versus dark. It was essentially competitiveness versus cooperation, which again is a great metaphor for video games.
It's like Gryffindor versus Slytherin,
especially a game that has both PvE and PvP elements in it. Like it was this idea. It was a perfect kind of like, and they completely cut all of that out and just said like, you are the light. The guardians must take the light from inside the traveler and stop the darkness and all the dark evil. And I'm like, this is, don't get me wrong, light versus dark is a great metaphor. A great metaphor for like conceptualizing of good versus evil. There are some great stories that do it well, but it's also the biggest cliche in storytelling. Like I swear it is the biggest cliche.
It's the center of Kingdom Hearts too.
Yeah, exactly. And so it's Kingdom Hearts. It's the center of so many. Legend of Zelda. Zelda. Like there's always whether again, like I said, whether it's order versus chaos, or whatever. So just the fact that like it frustrates me in Destiny that they watered down what could have been a really interesting counterpoint. Competitiveness versus cooperation is actually interesting. They watered it down to just light versus dark. The other one, World of Warcraft, I want to talk about because they're starting to explore this idea that like I mean, they always had the light. The light was actually a religion in World of Warcraft. And then there's the shadow or the void.
Yeah.
And they're starting to explore this idea that like, just because it's the void doesn't necessarily mean it's bad, and just because it's the light doesn't necessarily mean it's good.
But that's now.
It's now. Yeah,
It's
yeah. No, they
14-year-old
definitely had the Warcraft 1, 2, 3, and the first like 4 or 5 expansions of World of Warcraft.
Yeah.
Any character that was for the light, they were generally seen as a good character, with the exception of like the Scarlet Crusade. I don't know if you ever remember the Scarlet Crusade. Yeah, they were like, they just thought they were in the right in killing the undead, and so that was like
zealots.
their thing. Yeah, there were zealots. Yeah, exactly. And so that was one exploration of the light gone awry.
Yeah.
Recently, though, they've gone to the extent of saying like, oh, we want to do a light raid. Like a raid of light characters where they are oppressive and trying to bring order, like a rigid order to the universe,
Like a lawful good order?
Lawful good, but it would be more like lawful evil in this case, because the morality behind it would be like, we want to bring law and order, but we wanted to bring it on our terms in an oppressive way. And so they're like, we're going to do a whole raid where you go into this light palace and fight light beings. So it's just, I mean, it's kind of interesting they're exploring that, but it's also still really cliche. You know what I mean? Like, don't get me wrong, I thought it was boring that, paladins were always the good guys and, warlocks were always the bad guys. But I just think there's a more nuanced and interesting way of exploring that than just, oh, but light can be bad too. So, but dualism, it's everywhere. So it's definitely one that we have to bring up. Yep. All right. The next two are pretty, I think we can hit pretty quick. The first one I want to talk about, it's not so much a theology, like it's not so much like a philosophical musing, as more of like a storytelling device that is actually rooted in basically a religious extrapolation that may or may not be true. And it is this idea of the Nephilim.
Yeah, which is new to me completely.
Really? Okay.
Yeah, I've never heard this word.
So the Nephilim. Okay, so what the Nephilim come from is a word in the Bible in Genesis ? There's a couple of Old Testament books that have the word Nephilim in it.
Okay.
And in Genesis, the Genesis account comes from the story of Noah.
Okay.
And it says the sons of God mated with the daughters of man and created a race called the Nephilim.
Okay.
And that's part of the reason why God wiped out the earth. They were the predecessors to the giants. So specifically, Goliath was a descendant of the Nephilim.
Oh, all right.
So there is some sense of supernatural. There is some implication of something supernatural because, again, Goliath was descended from the Nephilim, but maybe not. You could take a scientific approach and say, so one interpretation, the sort of easy interpretation of the Nephilim from the Bible is that the sons of God are just like the line of Seth, because Seth was faithful versus Cain, who murdered his brother and was unfaithful.
Abel?
Cain murdered Abel. And then there was a third son of Eve called Seth. So the line of Seth is the sons of God, and the line of Cain is the daughters of Adam, or the daughters of man. Yeah. And so it could just be intermingling of essentially what boil down to religious groups.
Yeah.
But there's one interpretation that is the sons of God is used 4 times in the Old Testament. That word that is translated sons of God. And each of the 4 times it's used in the Old Testament, it's in reference to angelic beings.
Okay.
So specifically, the biggest example is in Job. It says the sons of God gathered before God. And it's talking about angelic beings, not men. So that interpretation is that the sons of God, these angels, mated with humans and made a hybrid race called the Nephilim.
Interesting.
So, Bible lesson for the day. You can subscribe to whichever interpretation you want. It doesn't really matter. If you want to believe that there are some cool giant BC monsters out there called the Nephilim that were drowned off in the flood, so not actually still out there,
right?
Then you're welcome to believe that. It's fine. If you want to believe that it was just religious groups intermingling, that's also fine. Where it shows up in video games is it shows up a lot. So whether it's some kind of hybrid of something, a character is a hybrid of, they have some kind of, Kratos is a great example, or more importantly, his son,
right,
who is half god. That's essentially a hybrid.
Atreus.
Yeah, Atreus is a hybrid, is in a way you could describe him as a Nephilim.
Yeah.
But where the examples of where the actual word Nephilim is used is Diablo 3.
Oh yeah, it's all through Diablo. Diablo culture in general, or the culture in the Diablo series.
Yeah, but specifically Diablo 3, they actually confirm that your characters are Nephilim. That they are, and it's usually in video games, it's usually angels and demons specifically, not angels and men.
Right.
So yeah, you're a Nephilim in Diablo 3, and then also in Darksiders 2, they confirmed that the Horsemen are Nephilim as well. Yeah. So that's a huge plot in Darksiders. It's a huge part of the plot in Darksiders 2. And those two games came out very close together. Mm-hmm. And so I think I played Darksiders 2 first, and so when I played Diablo 3 and I was like, wait, you're saying we're Nephilim? I was like, wait a minute, this is becoming popular. Yep. Like the idea of the Nephilim, it's sort of like suddenly video game writers were like, oh yeah, there's this story in the Bible about angels mating with people and creating a third, more powerful race than both.
You marked that they're stronger than either.
Yes, that is how they are in most video games. They are described as that way. Now, I don't know what the biblical implication was supposed to be, but in video games it was. The whole idea is like in Diablo 3, you're stronger than both angels and demons because you killed Diablo, the primeval, and you also can kill angels. You killed Malthael in the Reaper of Souls. So in Darksiders 2, it's the same. Like they're stronger than both angels and demons. So that's kind of one of the notable characteristics of this idea. Is
wait, isn't Devil May Cry? Isn't he a half?
He is. Well, he's half demon, half human, I think. Yeah. So it's the same idea.
And it was around the same time too.
And he's stronger than demons.
I mean, a little earlier, but
yeah. So it's definitely it's everywhere, and I just think it's an interesting. I don't know what you would describe it because it's not really a theology, but it's definitely it's taking this biblical idea of Nephilim, which again is hotly debated among scholars. Like it might not mean that at all, and they're like, "Oh yeah, angels mixing with demons, making a third thing."
This sounds cool.
But it's not just angels and demons too. You see it in all kinds of games. Like a character is like half of like a hybrid being of something else, and therefore stronger than both.
Then you have the plot lines of where they're cast aside and thought of as less because they're half of each one.
Exactly, yeah. I thought of Aloy, but she's not actually a hybrid. She's just artificial.
Yeah.
Yeah, kind of. Not even artificial, but just like a clone. She was a clone. That's what she was. But she's not like half and half of something.
Right.
Anyways. Cool. The one other thing, it's again, similarly not really a theology, but it is like a religious thing that keeps popping up in games. And that it's really simple, but it's cults. Mm-hmm. Cults as like bad guys. Again, cults as sort of like, oh, they're part of this crazy cult, so they must be easy. You can just kill them with impunity.
They're cuckoo bananas. Yeah. Need to go.
Mm-hmm. Biggest example is Far Cry 5. Or most recent
5,
example is Far Cry 5.
Like it was an outcry. People were so distraught that Ubisoft didn't, quote, go far enough with exploring the ideas of the alt-right and their pitchforks and tiki torches. And so like they touched on it, but that wasn't the point of the game.
Right.
But people were trying to dig into it.
It was also in development long before all of these events happened. Like Far Cry 5 was in development way before Trump was even elected as president, much less things like Charlottesville happened. So of course there's decisions. They can go back and kind of tweak some stuff to kind of tell something, but like the game was being made. Like most of the major decisions of the game were made long before the actual political things came about.
But the game does center around like a cult.
Yep.
That's like kind of like the alt-right, for a lack of a better description. So that's why I wanted to note that, was because it sparked this giant conspiracy, controversy about all of that and the whole alt-right thing and how relevant just the idea of cults are in our culture today, and like how they're it's a negative word with a massive negative connotation.
Right, and there's always like, I mean, a cult, like, I mean, to take an extreme example, Christianity was referred to as a cult of Judaism when it first, when it first emerged. So it's like, not all cults are bad. A lot of cults are just,
Judaism is not a cult, though.
Christianity was a cult of Judaism. So like, it was a subsect, like just a smaller, like, it was seen as just sort of this cult, like extreme cult. Essentially. So like a lot of big religions begin as cults. Just because a organized religion is a cult doesn't necessarily mean it teaches bad things. A lot of them do and do horrible things, but a lot of them also too are people who are just misguided.
Yeah.
So like there's a lot of members of, I will say that I think that Scientology is a cult. If that offends someone, apologies. Yeah. I'm not meant to mean to offend it, but I think they exhibit behaviors. I just said that my religion was originally seen as a cult too. So that's how it's fair. So, but again, a lot of people can be misguided and misled, and it's unfortunate, but it also doesn't mean, like, most of the cults that are portrayed in video games, they're always evil and are trying to either destroy the world or also trying to are okay with just killing people with impunity. You know what I mean? And that's it's just kind of, so again, it's just another excuse for us as the player to be like, let's kill them.
Right.
But you see it in Silent Hill. You see it in
what was the cult in Silent Hill?
I don't remember what it was
Origins or something?
Something like that. The Origin or something like that.
Yeah.
And then there's Warcraft 3, Cult of the Damned. This necromantic cult trying to bring about the Lich King's, the rise of the Lich King, all that stuff. Yeah. It's in the new game Call of Cthulhu, which is based off of H.P. Lovecraft stuff, which is literary. But again, the Cult of Cthulhu is like, we want to bring about the awakening of this entity that will bring about the destruction of the world.
That game looks so good.
It does look really fun.
So fun.
So it's just kind of interesting that cults kind of pop up a lot and are very negatively portrayed in video games. But they're negatively portrayed because they're an excuse for us as the player to kill them. Whereas, again, I'm not going to say I'm pro cult, but there's a lot more nuance to what cults are and how they operate.
Bottom line is you shouldn't just kill anyone without impunity.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that's kind of what we're saying here.
Unless it's playing a video game, in which case,
they're not real.
Just have fun. Don't be a jerk. Just don't let it make you become a jerk. Yeah. Be open to nuance.
Yes.
Don't just see everyone as a video game character who must be crushed, or an NPC that must be crushed. I think if that's the takeaway. So I hope you got something out of this conversation. Is there anything else you wanted to add to any of those?
Yeah. I think we're good.
Cool. Yeah, feel free to, if there are other philosophies or theologies that you find pop up in video games that you think is interesting, and sometimes, maybe you're like, this is kind of out of place, or maybe it's like, oh yeah, they didn't think that one through, or maybe you're like, yep, this is a really cool philosophy that I think keeps popping up in video games. Let us know. We'd love to hear about it. So tell them again. If they've forgotten,
where can you find us?
Where can they find us?
80bitpodsmash.com. That's our landing website. Links to Google Play and iTunes. Please go there and give us a review, a star rating of some sort, and some text. And find us on Facebook, Reddit, Twitter, Instagram, all 80bit Podsmash. No hyphens, uppercases. 80bit Podsmash.
All right. Well, until next week, make sure to sacrifice to whichever god or deity of your choice. And have a good week.
See you next week.